Hi everyone, my name is Taryn with Quest and welcome to our PeopleSoft week. Today's presentation is PeopleSoft automation, testing, data entry, and validation with PTF. So a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. All attendee lines are in mute and will stay in mute throughout this session. If you do have any questions, please put those into the question drop-down box and we will answer those at the end of today's session. And this is being recorded and it will be on the Quest content library. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Valentine, who will get things started.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. Again, welcome to this presentation on the PeopleSoft automation. We're going to be looking at general testing, data entry with automation testing tools, and some validation with the PeopleSoft test framework. A quick intro to myself. My name is Valentine Todoro. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been a PeopleSoft consultant for 11 years now, going on 12. I've been primarily in the financial space, but I've done a ton of HCM as well, and primarily doing automation, both PeopleSoft, cloud automation, and others. So 73 implementations of the PeopleSoft test framework over those 11 years. And I've seen it all over North America with every possible customization, bolt-on, configuration imaginable. We've been able to automate at various levels for a lot of my clients. I've worked with PeopleSoft development, so I spent 7 years as an Oracle employee as well, consultant, project manager, developer, and I have worked with them to develop some of the data loader tools, which we'll focus on later in this presentation, that govern how data is staged before a test is actually executed. I've used all the versions. I got my hands on the first version of PTF when it came out in Tools 8.5.1. And I have seen it progress over these last couple of years to the tool that it is today with 8.5.8 and 8.5.9. So I've also built various integrations for the PeopleSoft test framework with other test management software, so that there's a seamless integration with automation. If you have end users or just testers in general that are doing testing, they can actually use their test management software, be it ALM or SpirePlan. They would kick off automation tests in PTF, and there will be communication back and forth in terms of results, fails, passes, ID generated, and so forth. I've designed all of the bolt-on tools, reporting tools, and methods, strategies around PTF as well for Elir, and have developed a lot of the kind of reusable assets that we have in-house that we bring to a lot of our clients to make transitioning to this automated space a lot easier. So if you guys have any PTF questions, definitely at the end, bring them up, and I can cover a broad range from implementation, strategy, to very granular questions on PTF, so don't be shy with asking. All right. A quick intro of Elir. So this is the company I'm with right now. We've been in business since 2005, so we're running around 16 years or so. And we like to say that we are a trusted partner and advisor to a lot of our clients. We have a lot of recurring business because we have kind of built that rapport with a lot of our clients, and we have over 250 plus. A lot of them are Fortune 500. We are an Oracle partner as well. We have, various practices. Of course, PeopleSoft is our bread and butter. We do have both finance and HCM implementation updates, fit gaps, you name it. We're able to help you with any aspect of the POM lifecycle. We have strategic advisory services pillar as well, along with the cloud implementation pillar. So we can help you with all your application and your needs. Okay. So today's agenda, we're going to do a high-level overview of PTF. I like to lead with this pretty much in every one of my demos or sessions, just because there might be people out there that have never seen PTF or looked at automation in general for PeopleSoft. So I'll do a quick overview of that. Then we'll jump into kind of what is automation, what is testing with PeopleSoft, some of the things to consider, how to automate, how you actually execute these reports, how you interpret the results themselves, the various validations that can happen on pages or components. We'll discuss bolt-ons. So this tool is a very scalable tool, just like everything else PeopleSoft, and you can expand it with bolt-ons if you want some additional reporting capabilities and drill downs and access. So Boltons are great, and we'll discuss not just Boltons, but some of the XML reports that PTF generates, some of the pivot grids and queries you can also build to extract, resulting data from that. Also discuss the continuing investment and Oracle PeopleSoft has in the PTF tool, because it's so cornerstone to how they do their business and how they release these PUM images every so often. And we'll discuss some considerations and some ROI on this tool itself. And quickly before we get into the overview, this little image is pretty critical because it kind of shows the shift that we have in PeopleSoft from those 9.0 to 9.1 upgrades and 9.1 to 9.2, where you would have dedicated weeks where you could sit down and do your testing. You could have all your testers or UAT individuals in a room all testing simultaneously. That kind of becomes impossible with the new method of these PUM images that you might be consuming once a year or twice per year. You still have to do the full gamut of testing. It's not just enough to test that new component or that new feature or bug fix that you might have implemented from that PUM. You really need to test everything, just like you did before with the large upgrades. So these smaller updates, you still have to go through your smoke testing, unit testing cycle, make sure all the integrations are working okay, system is working okay, things are being dispatched, received, all that is working okay. So you really need an automation testing tool to be able to handle these more occurring mini upgrades or updates as they're called. So that's pretty much the business driver for why PTF was invented in the first place. And there's other testing tools out there, which I'm not going to mention, but I do need to say that PTF is built by PeopleSoft for PTF and PeopleSoft purposes. A lot of the functions, procedures, things that are built inside PeopleSoft test framework are so specific to PeopleSoft, it's impossible for other testing tools to mimic what PTF can do, okay? It's a very, very important point. There's reports and change impact reports and gap reports that come with PTF that other testing tools just are not capable of, inspecting the pages that way. They're not able to anticipate changes as new PUM images come about. So PTF is the only one that's capable of doing that, right? I have about 2 slides on the intro, then we'll get into the more meat of the presentation. But so the tool itself was introduced in 851, because as I mentioned in my intro, that was around 2010, 2009 time frame. The 851 is the beta version of the tool. It became a lot more stable with 852 and onwards. At its core, this is a functional application testing tool, so it can do all your unit, system integration testing cycles, UAT cycles, but it's not meant as a penetration testing tool, a load testing tool. There's other software that do that. This is purely a functional progression testing tool for those cycles, okay? Of course, automation equals consistency, and with that consistency, you can actually build on top of rudimentary scripts and actually introduce a lot more scope to your testing. So before, when you were able to do a couple of happy path tests, a couple of negative tests, with automation, you can actually do thousands of tests for that given component, since you can loop through one process or an end-to-end business process hundreds and thousands of times if you chose to, with different users with different data. You can actually expand the scope of how much you can actually test now if you move to automation, okay? The accuracy there, obviously automation again equals consistency, so the way that it performs the testing during your current PUM update cycle, how it does the testing in the future of PUM update cycle is going to be consistent. It's going to hit the exact same fields. It's going to run the same processes. Yes, the data might alter, or the users might alter, but the process, the actual physical interactions it's doing is going to stay consistent across those updates, unless you change it, of course. Okay. Of course, there's a reduction in testing time, and that's kind of the key things to any kind of automation is how can I reduce the testing time while still, being able to go through what currently I'm doing with manual testing. And obviously these scripts can be executed during your workday. They can be executed at night if you chose to. You can schedule these over the weekend. You can run them from, like I mentioned, test management software, so you can trigger them kind of as a need to run basis. So there's a lot of flexibility and in the time reduction space, but obviously there's a lot of time reduction. And I think I have a little video in a slide or two that presents kind of the speed of PTF compared to manual testing. Okay. Increase in the scope of testing, so you can do a lot more transactional data per given component or per business process than you could do with manual testing. So you can feed it a lot more data, and you can source that data, from the database itself. You can source it from Excel files, or you can manually define it in each of the scripts themselves. So there's a lot of, again, flexibility with how you source the data, how you execute the scripts, how many times you execute the scripts. And then obviously on the back end, you're doing the interpretation of the results, what actually happened in these cycles of tests, what combination of data, maybe there was a chart view combo that failed because it was invalid, yet it was able to source it. So you can do a lot of mixing and matching with this tool in terms of the data and how many times you cycle that data. There are also, and I kind of mentioned these already, there's specific reports that are PTF only, PeopleSoft only, and they're really baked into the whole system of PUM updates. So every time, say you have a set of scripts, maybe 500 PTF scripts that you have gone through and automated, you've kind of done a little mock cycle and they work okay. The next time you actually go to do a PUM image, you can actually run a lot of these delivered reports to analyze if there's going to be actual impacts on your PTF scripts. You can run reports to analyze the gaps that you might have in terms of what you're actually testing. So if that image that you selected and the changes from that image, maybe some new functionality or bug fixes are brought over, they might impact your PTF scripts. They're obviously going to affect your environment, but there's reports that actually analyze if you are actually testing those changes that are coming in. Are you missing something? So there's a lot of individual reports, and PTF is a interconnected tool with the rest of the people tools, and a lot of the data and the metadata it stores, it correlates directly with App Designer, so you can do a lot of compare reports and analyze your scripts and make sure that everything is working okay. Things that are impossible to do with third-party testing tools, or even open source tools for that matter. All that information is, of course, stored in the database, so you would actually configure the PTF client itself, the automation testing tool, with the PeopleSoft environment, and it actually will store all your PeopleSoft scripts, script data, and the execution logs inside the PeopleSoft database. So you actually have that level of security as well. If you have very sensitive information that you brought down from production, you never scrubbed it, you know that your actual automated test scripts are also residing in that secured environment. Okay, nothing is actually stored on those local machines that PTF might be running on. So you have that same level of security. PTF actually still uses the PeopleSoft security as well. So everything is governed by the PeopleSoft PO configuration and security. So one singular setup. And the scripts themselves, it does go through a recording playback system similar to other testing tools out there, or UPK if you've had exposure to that, which UPK is not a testing tool. But you have the ability to record new scripts. Say you're just starting up with the PTF tool and you need to build a new script on a customized component. You would press the record button, go through your PeopleSoft page as if you were just actively using the system. It can then give you the code, the actual PTF code. You have the ability to add some logic to it, conditionals, variables, whatever you need to make it robust and repeatable. And then you can just execute that over and over as many times as you want, that testing cycle or future testing cycles. So there's a actual method that you can go through to build new scripts if you don't have something built by a layer or delivered as a vanilla script. So we do recommend, if you do, and this is the video I was talking about, where it's showing automation on this side and manual testing on this side. And we do recommend that if you have anything that's medium to heavily customized, or obviously Boltons, that those be recorded from scratch. I found that if you deliver a vanilla script, sometimes even just by it's a vanilla component, but there's so much configuration that went into that page, it might be easier to record from scratch. And the actual recording method with this tool is very, very easy. It's very easy to build a script from scratch and then manipulate it. So there's a break even where do you use the vanilla script that we provided, or do you record one from scratch, and we can help you, of course, analyze that. as time goes on. So this is pretty much going to be done in a second. So if you were kind of following that, it was creating a requisition, it logged in as somebody else to do a budget check, and then logged in as somebody else to build a purchase order, probably as a buyer from that requisition. Well, the manual testing, in a minute is about to add the item, and probably create the requisition. So it's running obviously a lot faster than manual testing ever could. The other critical piece to automation with PTF is that ability to pass the data from one test to another. Because we know that once it creates a requisition, a unique rec ID is generated in the first test. Maybe some amounts or approvers are necessary for the second step, and that can be just flown from one test to another, to another, to another. Okay. Obviously, once this thing is PO has been created, dispatched, eventually you'll receive it, and maybe you receive it based on the requisition ID as buyers. You hopping in and out with different users and logging in and out to simulate different functions of PeopleSoft. So PTF is capable of doing that very easily. So automation equals consistency. I kind of already mentioned that, and we do have a lot of tools that we've developed to stage data. That was something that was overlooked in the first kind of couple of years of implementing this tool in the early 2010s. We could build scripts okay, and they can run okay, but once you kind of went through a cycle or two, or your data got old, we kind of needed a different method to stage data. Maybe it was Excel files, but really the ability to actually extract data directly from that target database became paramount, and it's the method that I use now, using the data loader tool to source data, whatever, if I need pending items, open periods, users that meet certain criteria. I'll source them directly from the database, and of course execute them cyclically through the PTF tool. Okay. Here you actually were watching on the right-hand side. PTF does have the capability to do form factor testing as well. And obviously, now that we have Fluid, you have that responsive theme with HTML5 and the CSS, where it reads the form factor of the page. It resizes based on priorities and how you've, if you built that, Fluid page in App Designer, it will open it up, resize it to that specific resolution, and then start testing. And obviously, PTF is not only capable of filling out fields, clicking on buttons, or processing, run requests. It's also able to extract items from these pages. It's able to interact with the different fields or pop-up messages. It knows how to tag different windows if you wanted to do, multiple sessions within that. Instances in that session. It's able to extract styles or colors if you had very specific branding requirements. You can actually test for that as well. The sky's the limit. If you have grids or scroll regions, there's actually methods that exist, kind of pre-built functions just coming out of PeopleSoft that help you to go through grids, find exact values, interact with the grid itself, or scroll regions. Here, of course, it's that's left side navigation. It knows how to open it up, parses the list, finds exact values, and of course, I think this is actually playing a loop. We're watching the same thing. It is, yeah. But just an example of form factor testing, which is it's not as critical to a lot of my companies, but as we become more and more mobile in this world, more and more people, if you want to approve your time from your phone by the PeopleSoft system, you can do that as well. So just an example, if you have, inventory, you're on the floor with an iPad or something, and you have PeopleSoft opened up, form factor testing is something you need to consider because it is going to be reformatting itself. It's not going to be that pixel perfect classic look. So you need to be able to test for that. And actually, I've found just through form factor testing that some of the vanilla stuff has a few errors in it with what's presented on the page. So it's been vetted out pretty well by PeopleSoft. There's always some combination of actions or data that can cause something to fail. So there's never enough testing. And one thing to note, and I don't think I had it on any of the slides, that PeopleSoft Oracle, they actually use PTF for all their testing. So every time they release a POM image, both finance or HCM, they actually have something on the order of 60,000 PTF scripts that they run to make sure those POM images are good, looking okay, they work okay before they release them. Okay, so that's their in-house testing tool, and it's going to be their in-house testing tool for a very long time. So it's definitely something to remember that, why not use a testing tool that PeopleSoft Oracle use? And because they use it, they actually introduce a lot of little add-ons and features within the tool that then they release as part of the next PUM tools upgrade. So it's ever evolving. It's evolved a lot since I saw it, first in 8.5.1. It's evolved tremendously, and it's become a lot more stable in a lot of sense, WebDriver and application-wise. So this is actually a screenshot of the coverage report, and of course the record and playback. So now we can actually look at data staging. So data staging is great. I mean, an automated script will run, it will log in as somebody, it's going to go to specific components. Maybe you're adding a record in that component, or updating an existing one. And within that pages, a collection of pages, you might be interacting with various fields, but really the data can always become obsolete. And I see that even the person you're logging in as can become obsolete. So sourcing data has become paramount, and it's something that is front and center whenever we start a new client and we're discussing, what scripts do we want to get built and what's the process for those scripts. The other piece of it is what's the data and how do we source the data. It's become almost one and two the most important things when building these. For example, here you have an item. I'm not sure if here it's going to add an item. I think it adds an item here, but it's going to, yes, adds an item. Okay, item ID, and continues on and fills out the pages. And a lot of this, I think the categories actually are sourced from a query. So you can do a lot of these queries in the background, and you just pretty much have to set it up in Query Manager, what data you want to extract, and then feed it into the data loader tool that I kind of helped develop 7-8 years ago now, back in Oracle, even longer than that, actually. Okay. But it really allows you to have that flexibility. And not only can you source data, but you can also have random generators, instances where you need things like, in vouchers where you need a unique invoice ID each and every time. Random generators are awesome. It's not something that comes just with PTF. It's something that we have built as part of our templates to just randomly generate numbers or letters if you need to add a person in HCM and you need a unique name each and every time, along with a unique Social Security number. We can use random generators to constantly be generating data for us. Okay. The benefit of the data loader tool, and this is just something that comes inside PTF, it's not some additional add-on or something custom. This is something that comes embedded within PTF. Obviously, you could do the first value. If that query has one field on it with a set of data that's all valid data, and just needs to be processed, you can just extract the first value out of that query, or you can loop this entire process, kind of what this is doing. You can kind of continuously cycle through a given test. Actually, I think this might be looping again the same way, but you can go through that same process over and over and over again, many times, over and over, using that extracted value. So you set up a loop and then just use the array and each value from the array to complete a task. Okay. And obviously here where our purpose is, testing, but I have actually seen a few of my clients that use this for data loading. So maybe they have consumed a company, or they're merging business units and they have all this flat file data. Yes, you could upload it with Excel to CI or all kinds of data mover trickery, or you could just feed it right into PTF, play the PTF script, loop it 300 times because there's 300 data points to be added, and then PTF literally goes through the pages, adding that data in maybe a conversion environment somewhere. Okay. The beauty of this is you have all that page validation, they can get triggered. Okay, so if there's something invalid with your conversion data, maybe it wasn't scrubbed properly and imported, it will catch it here because you have all that validation that happens right here on the PeopleSoft layer. So it's a lot slower than Excel to CI, but it would be filling out that data continuously. And then once it's ready, then you probably move it from that conversion to some kind of test environment to you go live, right? So just kind of repeats. So data loading, and there's many ways you can load it. You can have a PTF script that runs beforehand that goes to Query Manager and extracts the data. That was kind of the old way I used to do it. Now you just run the data loader. It goes through a service operation, extracting the data in an array, and then you just cycle through that array within your PTF tool once or row count number of times. Okay. This is the query method. So this is the old method that I had to go through to actually extract data. That's why we actually built the data loader piece within PTF, because this was good. It's a good method, and it also validates that query manager is working okay, and you're able to run a query. And you can even build kind of temporary queries. If you need just specific data, but you don't want to save the query, you can actually go through Query Manager and build a PTF script that builds a query for you. You can even build it to add a table to the query security tree, extract whatever data we need based on criteria, and then just never save the data. Extract it, put it in an array somewhere, and then start using it up. This, in this instance, it's actually creating requisition lines, and what I did in the query is give me all the active categories, nothing that's inactive, but everything that's active, like supplies right there, and just keep adding lines to this requisition with different categories. So you see now it's cycling or software, and it looks like I didn't add the criteria, and it just keeps going, but it'll keep track of every iteration of that loop. And if there's one combination that was bad, maybe we fed it a bad supplier, or units and measure is incorrect, it will note that and then just continues onward. Okay. And there's different levels of stop on first error or try to finish the script, till the end, but mark something that might have failed in the middle of it. Okay. So it's going to continue adding, and you can manipulate any of those values. I'm just interacting with a few fields, but if you needed different suppliers, if you needed manufacturing IDs, the variations are pretty much infinite here. If you need to test punch out, if you need to test the catalog, you can do all of those variations with PTF, check out, do any kind of approval, budget checking, PO, calc, out of source, whatever you need to in chain. Okay. But data has become paramount. So if anybody here is, you guys are implementing PTF on your own within your organization, make sure you guys are not only looking at trainings from Oracle or earlier, but also how are you going to manage your data? Okay, how are you going to source the data for automation? It's because you don't want to go there, a year or two later with your PTF scripts, have everything recorded and nothing is working because you never addressed the data. And now you have to sit there and update all the scripts with all the users or data combos, open periods. It's going to take you longer to do that than just to manually test it. So when you record these, we also think about the data and how we source the data. It's 1 and 2 now, right? Now, it's great that you can apply all this data, run the test. Obviously, PTF is going to validate that certain messages come up, that the page goes to success, that sequence ID goes from next to a specific value. It can run your online processes to make sure that they go to success, they're posted. It can open up the PDF that's generated and screenshot it. It can open up PS jobs and make sure those individual processes all work okay. So it can do the gamut of the interaction within your PeopleSoft page. But you can also do some granular things, and I'm going to focus on 2 validation pieces that I've used in the past. One is a page level validation, and the other is a data level validation. Okay, the data level is more for interfaces, how I actually do some interface testing, but we'll focus on the page level first. Okay, and this is pretty much validation on the page, and I've seen this with configuration, I've seen it with just basic security. The sky's the limit. One example, looks like I have an example there, is payroll parallel compare. So you have the capability, of course, to run any end-to-end process or any end-to-end cycle. Payroll is a good example of page level validation, because what you can do is, pick one person or 50 people at random, do all kinds of payrolls and adjustments or what benefits, deductions, whatever you need to do in one environment, maybe your legacy environment or your current dev, and then run the same process with the same people in a new environment, maybe that new environment that has your tax updates or your new POM image. So you run the same process in both environments, and PTF is able to run in one environment, switch environments, run against the other environment with exact same data, exact same parameters. And then what it can do is actually it can compare those 2 pages, okay, and the data on those 2. So Once it runs it, maybe you run a report in each environment with whatever the pace stub was, with all the amounts on it, grab all those as variables, and then just compare them and make sure everything matches, okay? Or you can do this on a larger scale with 50 individuals and randomly select the 50 initially, run payroll in both environments with those 50, and then actually start comparing the data between those two to make sure everything is working okay and everything, you know, matched. Or if obviously maybe because of the tax updates it's slightly different, PTF can actually do arithmetic. Maybe there was a 5% tax increase on something. It can actually do the comparison. It should be 5% more than the old environment, and it'll actually check to make sure it's 5% higher for that given line item. So it can do actually a lot of arithmetic, and I've seen it do some really complex things. So you can kind of calculate things. I've done a lot where you have multiple lines and they have to sum up somewhere, and then they have to have a negative to it. So you can do all kinds of calculations from one environment to another, or just stay in the same environment and do validation compares. So, and you can check anything on the page. You can check obviously values, IDs that are generated, but you can also check, I kind of mentioned this earlier, stylistic elements. It can make sure that any custom fields you have the right title, they're located in the right location. So you can do a lot. One thing I've also done page level is configuration validation. Just it scours your configurations, making sure everything is set correctly, or it can actually extract validation or configuration from one environment and apply it to another. So you can mix and match and, you know, to your heart's content with what it's capable of doing validation wise, or actually extracting set of data from one environment and applying it to another, okay? Which is not really validation, it's actually like a configuration transfer of sorts. So, but there's a lot of things that you are capable of doing with the validation, and you can verify fields, you can verify the messages come up. Maybe there's some warning messages or informational messages which you want to pop up on the page because of a set of data that was placed, and you want to make sure that that message does come up. PTF can check for that. If an error message does come up just because of PeopleSoft, it'll actually keep track of that error message, the IDs, the screenshot of that error message, you know, whatever you want out of it, it's capable of extracting or validating, okay? That brings us to table level validation, okay? This is what I do with a lot of my interfaces, maybe an interface, you know, with some data to a staging table somewhere, and then you kick off a process to disperse that data across your PeopleSoft tables. PTF can actually do a lot of validation, pre-processing and post-processing, and it can actually, using that same data loader tool that I mentioned, can actually parse thousands and millions of lines of table data looking for, you know, issues. If something needed a prefix or something had to be always below 30 and it finds a 31 in there, you know, it's able to catch that. It's able to mark that line as a fail, tell you exactly where it is and, you know, what that interface brought in. So that interface probably didn't work okay. Or if there's dates, but it brought in some kind of, you know, flipped date time, you know, the European versus the American, where they flip the dates and the dates and the months, I can't speak right now, then it would catch that. So it can do a lot of arithmetic, checking in your tables before it even runs the process. And then maybe based on the data before, based on the data that after processing, it can correlate that and check it as well. So if that third or that 28, the first line is multiplied by 1,000 by the process, and you can go check in the target table that it is this times 1,000 equals whatever is in the target table. So not the best example, but you know, you can do a lot with it. And I do a lot of my interface testing with this table level validation that PTF offers. Okay, and this actually doesn't start a PIA environment. It does it all kind of in the shell itself within PTF itself. It's able to do all the comparisons. It never actually starts a browser, never actually logs in. It's all doing it through service operations, and it's using the PTF client as the controller pretty much for that validation. All right. So that kind of brings us into the reporting. So it's great and all that you can run these, you can schedule these tests, and I've had other PeopleSoft sessions that I focus on how you schedule them, how you call PTF tests, how you can integrate PTF with other testing tools. But once that's all done and you guys you know, run through your tests, Maybe you have something like 500 PTF tests, you run them all. How do you interpret the results? It's great that they all ran, but how do you get pass fails? How do you triage issues? So this is kind of the reporting of PTF, and there's various flavors and methods you can do that. So starting counting down here at the bottom, when you run the PTF test, it does a couple of things. So you run it just on the client itself. You can always open up the log and the results right there in the client, and it gives you this, if you haven't started a lot, a very cryptic log of the variables that were set, the page buttons that were clicked, the fields that were processed, any messages or warnings or screenshots. They can be all opened up locally within the client itself. But that's not the only place that the logs are written to. Okay? The other location is the database itself. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, PTF is connected to some kind of PeopleSoft environment, and all the scripts, the script data, and logs, be them screenshots or just line level logs, are stored in that database. So you have full capability of querying those database tables, okay? None of them in a query security tree, so you have to add them to the query security tree. And once you do that, you can, of course, build to your heart's content all the queries that you want, all the composite queries. From there, you can build various pivot grids and Boltons. Pivot grids have become pretty important because you can do a lot with pivot grids. You can drill down into them. You can formulate the data if you're somebody that's just focused on benefits or purchasing, for example. Maybe your module is the most important, so you don't need the high level overview of every module and pass fail. You just want to look at your benefits or your purchasing module and what is going on in there, so you can have personalized views of the PTF results right there in your pivot grid. Okay. Obviously, with this, you also have that bolt-on capability, which I'll discuss in a second. But using those tables, you can build very, very lightweight bolt-ons that all they do is, have a bunch of views in there in the background, and there you just presenting the data in a different flavor. Okay, but you can create those. And I've met a lot of other consultancies out there that have very, very advanced bolt-ons that do all the management of the software as well, and of the scripts themselves. So if you wanted to add data, you can do it on the bolt-on for the individual script. Or if you wanted to schedule something, you can do it on the bolt-on and trigger it. The sky's the limit of how expandable this tool is, and kind of follows the same methodology that PeopleSoft has, which is it's customizable. And everybody talks about reduced customizations, which obviously has a lot of importance, but you can make this tool do whatever you want for you. Okay, it's just a framework. I know it says test framework in front of it, but you can almost strip out the test in front of it, and it becomes an automation framework where you can do pretty much anything automation-wise, not just testing. Okay, conversions, actual automation and production, testing. You can do a lot with it. One thing I also didn't mention in the intro is PTF is included in your license. So everybody that's paying a PeopleSoft license since 851, you have PTF already in your tool list. It's already in there. You're paying for it. I used to say it was free, but it's just bundled in your price. So might as well start using it if it's free, right? All right. So coming back to the reporting. So obviously you can do a lot within the database. Pivot grids, queries, bolt-ons, you name it. But the other location that PTF stores and sends information is actually locally. So it's able to actually send data to, a local directory or to a shared drive. Excuse me. And what it sends to the shared drive is actually an XML report with all that information, all the log information of what happened in that test. Okay. And it's mentioned, I think, in 1 or 2 pages in the people book, but what you can do with that XML is you can actually apply a style sheet to that XML. And everybody that on this call that's opened up an XML document just in the notepad or something knows that, it's just a payload of data with some tags on it. So unless you can read thousands of lines, it doesn't mean a lot. So what we do is we take that XML, we apply a style sheet. So the style sheet, they're just XSL documents. And they just have a bunch of HTML tags and loops that extract what's data is in the XML and present it in an HTML browser. Okay, and that's what this screenshot here represents. Is you're opening up the XML. You can kind of see the path up here. And instead of it just opening up with a bunch of tags, it opens up as a browser page, very rudimentary HTML page. They kind of tell you, what environment was run, what's the module, the test, the overall result, who ran the test, and the duration of that given test, okay? And in the body, you might have a couple of screenshots here. We just have one screenshot of the confirmation page. It looks like it also extracted the ID that was generated and the amount. So it gives you a quick synopsis of what happened in that test, all right? Other tests will, of course, have different details at the header level, and they might have many, many more screenshots and much more data that's extracted out of there, okay? Maybe there's some confirmation messages that needed to be verified or other IDs that are extracted. This will kind of list it. And the beauty of this, and a lot of my clients have liked this is a physical asset, something that can be printed if you want to, something that can be saved as a PDF document onto a shared drive for future audits if somebody does want to, why was this tested? Yes, it was tested by automation. What do you have proof? Well, yeah, the dev environment is down or the test environment is down, but yes, I have these physical reports of what actually happened, when it was run, who ran it, all the information needed to say, yes, we just tested. Look at the screenshot. There's a confirmation. All right. Another thing that's really good about these locally stored reports is it also extracts the images. So if one of those screenshots was a PeopleSoft error, some kind of data inconsistency error, or an actual, people code error, you can immediately grab that screenshot. Maybe you don't have PeopleSoft open on that page. You can immediately grab that screenshot and start your triage process, start a ticket for it, and route it appropriately. So there's many ways to mix and match that. And I actually use the XML a lot with integrations. So say you have an integration to another system, that test management software can kick off PTF. PTF runs its thing and runs the PTF test. It echoes back that it was a pass, it was a fail. And it also echoes back this XML with the report, because PTF might be running on a server somewhere. You might never see it go through the pages. It might echo back a pass, but maybe it didn't produce something. So if it was like a run control page where you're running the process, sometimes it goes to success, but nothing actually was successful. This kind of gives you that more granular report that, this was run, it went to success, it was posted, but there was no PDF output. It wasn't able to screenshot the PDF output. So it kind of gets that granular with it. But that's kind of reporting at a high level. So I didn't mention the bolt-on, and again, bolt-ons, you can make a very basic bolt-on with PTF. That just scours the log tables. It looks at, some performance data, and you can extract some performance data out of your scripts. So if you're running the same, add a person script or create a voucher script over and over again, you can actually start parameterizing the performance and actually figuring out what the performance is. And as you have, database admins maybe doing some materialized views or indexing of stuff to increase performance, you can actually gauge that performance, kind of user experience with PTF as well via this bolt-on that we have. It also kind of tells you a high level of, general AR general information. It was run and failed 6 times. It was twice in retest, whereas the added person has 4 passes and 3 fails. And then you can actually drill down into those individual instances and see, why did this fail? What was the combination of data that made it fail? Or if it passed, what are the 4 passes? I need that person ID for future testing, for downstream testing. You can kind of inspect that down to a very granular level. So not too many screenshots of the bolt-on, but kind of gets the picture. Okay. And of course, you can extract data. You can build. This is actually a pivot grid report of what happened in this cycle of testing, and you can drill down into it. So that's one of the powers when you combine vanilla functionality like these pivot grids with some, I don't want to say custom, but bolt-on functionality, and you can mix and match a lot with that. Okay. I kind of discussed the extendability a little bit. So you can integrate it with test management software. PTF does not have an API, no REST or SOAP or anything like that, but it can trigger, do a lot of things through command line. And most test management software out there has some kind of command line tool or a kind of a remote launcher or some capabilities to run command line. So when we've mixed and matched all kinds of combinations of virtual machines with PTF, with PowerShell code to make a trigger and echo back results, it can really do a lot, even though it doesn't have a pure API for it. Okay. You can build a complex API if you want through integration broker, because everything is going through integration broker, but it's kind of diminishing returns at that point if you're customizing so much just to get, you know, an automation tool. But everything that comes out of the box with PTF vanilla works great. There isn't too much you have to alter to get your scripts running. Obviously, you can schedule them, so you can schedule your a set of scripts, unit scripts, end-to-end scripts to trigger, you know, on weekends, at night, whenever you really need it to, right? And a lot of the processes are very scalable. The way you build a script and the way that, you know, I've evolved my practice and the way we build scripts here, they're building blocks. If you want to create a new end-to-end process, you grab kind of the definitions at the top and you start creating these end-to-end processes a lot easier. Maybe you want to declare the data at the top level. Maybe you want to declare static data. You can really mix and match how you align your end-to-end business processes, because there's components out there that are so complex and there's so many paths you could take. All of that needs to be evaluated even before you start recording. How do you record? What's, you know, the scope of this test? What paths does it need to take, positive or negative? Does it need to be pushed back on a certain level if you're doing approval framework? And if that happens, then how do you restart the process? Because you need to do an alters when it was pushed back and resubmit it, go through approval again. So there's a lot of considerations with automation. You could build very basic scripts, just press the record button and record PTF scripts. But if you really want to get the full power of this tool, you got to inject some conditional logic. You got to inject some if statements and parameterization and data sourcing. And then these scripts become very robust. And then you have to do less and less in the future. I'm not going to lie to you guys, there's a lot of upfront work with setting these things up, making sure they're aligned to the way you do business, the way you test, the way you stage data, the way your system is configured or customized. But once that's all done, it kind of gets easier and easier as time goes on. And you can start leveraging these scripts over and over and over. It doesn't go down to zero. There's always something to be done with PTF. If you guys introduce new features, maybe you want to record a PTF script. If you're you know, altering your pages, or, you know, you're removing customizations, or you might have to alter a few of your scripts. But there's even those vanilla reports I mentioned that help you to bridge that gap, and, you know, analyze the changes for you. You feed them into this mass update tool, and it pops them out. Okay. So that kind of leads us pretty much to the end of the presentation. I definitely want to leave about, you know, 10 minutes for Q&A, but I wanted to touch on this, and this is the continued investment that Oracle PeopleSoft have in this tool. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is their in-house testing tool. They use PTF. They don't use any Selenium tool out there or other test management software within Oracle. They use PTF for all their testing, okay, for all these common images that get released. All right, so why not use the same tool? And since it was introduced in 8.5.1, it's obviously gone through tons of updates and features that have been added to it to just make it more robust. The mass update tool was a huge one. This allows you to feed all the changes. So maybe you introduced a bunch of bug fixes and you retrofitted a bunch of your components, but you already had PTF scripts residing. That mass update tool can actually correlate the data, fix everything that you've changed, and your scripts are, again, reusable. Okay, you don't have to start from scratch. You just use the mass update tool, which is kind of prepackaged with PTF, and just manipulate your scripts with those newly added fields or those retrofitted field names or component names, and then your scripts are working again. So you don't have to start from scratch with each PUM image. All your scripts are forward compatible. You just have to use the tools that are given with PTF and PeopleSoft to manipulate them and evolve them in parallel as your application is evolving. Okay. 8.5.5, the ability to do Chrome, Firefox, IE. They had Edge for a while, but then they removed the Edge in 8.5.8. Not sure why. App Designer, you can actually build App Designer projects from PTF because they're so interconnected. You can toggle multiple windows. So you can have multiple sessions and instances open, and you can actually toggle and tag them if you wanted to. You have folder level security now too. So if you had specific roles within PTF, after they've authenticated, you can give them additional security based on the folder. If one person is only AM and one is GL, nobody can see their scripts. Okay. You can do execution options, doesn't matter. And one of the big things they introduced in 8.5.8 is the ability to run the background. So anybody that has had PTF knows that, or has run any kind of automation, once you run an automation, it takes over your screen. It opens up the browser, it starts clicking through and logging in tiles and component, but now you can actually do a headless Chrome execution, and it just runs in the background and returns the results to you. Okay, it doesn't take control of your screen. Okay, it kind of simulates the GUI in the background virtually, and then returns it back with the results. So, and then cross data sourcing. So now you can source data not just from the environment you're testing against, but maybe I want to go to another environment, grab some data, and apply it to this environment. So you can actually, within the same session, be mixing and matching where and how the data is sourced and applied to any given test. All right, and it's going to continue to evolve in 859 and so forth. So lots more coming. Some considerations kind of in closing, what will yield, maybe you're looking at PTF and you want to get a list of the first 50 or 100 scripts you want to record. Really, the ROI for this, you want to start with scripts that are customized, Boltons, high traffic areas, interfaces, punch outs. Those are all areas that can have a lot of issues. So you really want to target automation for those. Anything with downstream processes. So if you create an entry and it's got a bunch of processes below that, you want to make sure that that initial step and initial script is working okay for all those downstream processes. And I already mentioned Boltons and customizations. And so that leads us to who builds these automated scripts. Obviously, there is just said, and most consultancies out there have vanilla scripts. PeopleSoft did release a package years ago with some basic scripts, but they're not as useful as one would want. But most consultancies, and us included, have pre-built scripts that we start with, but usually we go through workshop sessions and training sessions to make sure that you guys in your own teams, if you have QA teams, if you just have developers, whatever your makeup is, knows the tool itself. But it does require some programming knowledge. So whoever the owner is of this tool, or whoever you've tasked with recording PTF tests, they need to be well versed in PeopleSoft architecture and know fundamental programming lingo, right? Because it can get pretty script heavy. Now, it is a much simpler interface than just freeform scripting and writing code in Java or something like that, or Ruby. It has its own makeup and structure that's very Excel-like, but you still have to know the concepts of a loop, a variable, conditional statements, things like that. Okay. All right, but one of the key things is, yes, and I already mentioned this, there's a lot of upfront to get these things going, but once you do that, our templates and the way we've designed our scripts, they're easy for any business owner, purely functional, to open up any of these PTF tests, set some data, and run them. Okay, we've kind of uniformly built a method for functional user interaction with this tool. Okay, once the scripts are built, which is very important. And we like to build our tests using templates and a very strict method because it makes it easier in the future to edit. If everything is uniform and follows the same standards and naming conventions, then it's easier to edit in the future. And that's something that's also overlooked a lot. You can't just have one developer building one way, another in another way. One of them leaves, the other doesn't know what the other one did, and you're throwing away scripts, rebuilding them. It becomes kind of a nightmare in that respect. So definitely have a lot of standards and methods lined up. So that's everything I have for the presentation. Obviously, you can contact me at Elir or sales@Elir if you have any questions or interest. And we have a full gamut of services around automation. Maybe you're looking at not just PeopleSoft automation, but cloud automation, but within PeopleSoft. If you're looking for just a couple of weeks to analyze how you have PTF stood up and installed, if you want just workshop weeks, or if you want a full-blown help us stand it up, teach our people, record the scripts, help us set it up and integrate it with testing tools, and record the scripts for us, we can do that as well. So we can offer and tailor contracts and services to any needs around testing. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. And we do have a few questions that have come in. So if anyone else does have questions, please put those into the drop-down box. So we'll try to get to all of the questions. If we don't have enough time, I will send these over to you and then we will just post them with the recording. So I'll go ahead with the first one. So with IE support ending June 22, does Oracle have a plan to use another browser for PTF recording?
From what I know, they're going to switch to Chrome. IE is supported until that, but I think the corporate IE is going to be supported further. Let me check. I think it goes on till 2025 IE support. But yes, there are plans to remove it as they're recording, because you still have to use IE for recording purposes, and then you switch over to Chrome or Firefox, usually for playback. You can switch to IE for playback too, but it's dreadfully slow. Yeah, June 2022 is the official date, but I think the actual corporate date is a little later than that. Actually, I might be wrong. It might be 2022. But yeah, it's going to get shifted over to Chrome since it's a more advanced browser.
Okay. And biggest issue we have with PTF is playback performance. Do you have a troubleshooting tips for playback performance? And then we also had a question of, have you leveraged PTF for performance testing?
So yes, executing with PTF can be troublesome. You got to really know how your web drivers are working. I do not recommend playing back in IE. Obviously, it's going to be decommissioned as well, but don't play back in IE. Use Firefox and Chrome, and also make sure that your web drivers, so you have PTF, the client, you have the browser, Chrome or Firefox. In the middle is a web driver. That web driver is actually what communicates back and forth with the browser. That web driver has to be on the exact same version as your browser. So if you go to Chrome or Google Chrome driver, you're going to go to the Chromium website, check whatever browser you have on that workstation, if it's 90 or 89, and download the appropriate web driver, okay? If that matches, it should work seamlessly. But performance-wise, that's the biggest one I see, is making sure the web driver is there to match either the Gecko driver for Firefox or the Chrome driver for Chrome. And also, within the working directory of PTF, you'll actually see a batch file. It's like IPv6 fix. That changes the NetSH prefix policies so that the IPv4 translations are higher up in the IPv6, which makes it a little faster. So run that batch file as an admin. So just do a PowerShell to that directory, run that batch file. There's only one batch file in there, and that should also help with IE performance as well. What was the secondary question? Performance something.
It was, have you leveraged PTF for performance testing?
Yeah, you can do it for performance testing to a degree, but not load testing. Okay, load testing is, you do a bunch of threads and users against the system to put the strain. But if you want to do performance testing, you can do that. And actually, my Bolton had that, because you have start time and an end time, and also durations. It pretty much tags every single action with a timestamp. You can take those timestamps and do some trickery in Query Manager to start extracting good duration, which gives you the performance. Is it taking slower or faster to run the same script, as a given user? So you can extract performance, but not load testing data. We usually supplement that with like another script, another testing tool out there for load testing. But
Okay.
yes, you can use some performance testing.
And the next question is, does PeopleSoft deliver any vanilla scripts for PTF?
Yeah, I mentioned this a few slides. They delivered one, and I think it was 8.5.6 is when they released a bundle. When you go to support.oracle.com, it's like one of the additional things you can download. Sometimes it's bundled in the POM image, but it's usually app designer project you can download. Those scripts are okay. They give you kind of an idea of what a PTF script should look like, but I really don't use them. They're built too complex for their own good. I like to build scripts in a slightly different fashion without library tests and they're just too cryptic for end user consumption, really. So I do my own stuff my own way. But they haven't released anything since 8.5.6, so it's been a long time since anything's been released.
Okay, and the next question is, can you give any insight on scheduling or running the PTF scripts from a command line?
Yeah, and there's an entire section in the People book that governs that. So just go to your People Tools, People book, go to Lifecycle Tools, Test Framework, And then in the subsection called creating tests and test cases, there's a subsection for executing tests, which has another subsection for command line. There it spells out all of the nuances to how to call the PTF tool, how to set all the parameters, with the environment, the execution option, the test case. And then you trigger that batch file that has that code, you trigger a schedule task, and then you can echo back the results. So definitely check out the PeopleBook. Again, PeopleBook's lifecycle tools, test framework, creating and running tests, and then within there you'll see command line execution, and that lists out all the variances and nuances to how you run it from command line. But you can run it from anywhere, from batch files, from other software, and then you can of course echo back the results just through variables, and then obviously transform them to meet the test management software input.
Okay. And we have, we'll take one more question before we close out. So yesterday it was brought up that PTF can tell you which pages are being used by the business. Sometimes users find new ways to do things outside of process documentation. Is that something that we will discuss today, or I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there is. So there is an entire piece, and actually it was in my presentation. I had a little graphic on it right here. Oh, shoot, where is it? There, this right here. So within the gap report, it's called a test coverage report. You can actually turn on usage monitor, which is part of like the performance monitor. And what you can do is you turn this on in production, it gathers just metadata, no user data or anything like that, but it gathers what are people clicking on component-wise, page-wise, link-wise, and then bring all that metadata to your testing environment, and you can run this report and it'll tell you, I have all of these PDF scripts, all 500. I've got some new things that are coming in as part of my change package for my POM image, but then I have all this stuff that, my production people are using, all these pages, and it'll actually list the pages down to the people code if you needed to. You can kind of customize the report, but it'll tell you the components they're using, and then you can kind of say, well, should we create a test for that? Yes, we should, and you can kind of fill in this light blue with your PTF test. So that coverage report analyzes all of those gaps, things coming into your system change-wise, usage, but you got to turn on a lot of stuff. There's like servlets you have to turn on, performance monitor, but you can extract that kind of usage information, bring it down to a testing environment, build scripts for that, and then see in the next cycle if you've covered all your bases with what people are using in the system. So there is a method for that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And that is all the questions that I believe we had. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks for coming and speaking with us as well. Just a quick reminder though that this was recorded and it will be uploaded to the Quest content library, and you can also find it on the Quest site under the PeopleSoft Week event page as well. So thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.